everyone. At this juncture, we will now discuss the lesson which focuses on the needs analysis. Before we begin, let us first identify the lesson objectives for today's discussion. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to first, describe the concept of need analysis in English for specific purposes. Second one, identify the three types of needs analysis. Third, classify the three types of needs analysis with respect to ESP learners' target, present, and learning situations. And lastly, relate all the important key points underlying need analysis on learning English for specific purposes. Moving on, let us now proceed to the overview of the lesson. In all ESP teaching situations, we must start by considering the needs of the learners and what they have to do in target situation. Needs are defined as being the requirements that the students have in order to be able to communicate effectively in a target situation. They are also defined as what the students need to learn to acquire the language. In education, need refers to the gap between what is and what ought to be, while in ESP, needs refers to what the learners has to be and do in the target situation using English. So as we all know, ESP is an approach to learning English which is based on the learner's needs. ESP is a highly effective approach to language teaching in which all decisions as to content and methods are based on the learner's reason for learning. On the basis of the professional requirements, learners need particular course designed to develop and practice English language skills. In the next slides, we will discuss the term needs for better understanding. So, needs refers to the study or job requirements of the students. It is incorporated of what they should be able to do at the end of the course. It is synonymous to objectives and personal aims according to Berwick 1989. It is also synonymous to necessary or those with the user institution view as desirable to be learned from a program of language instruction. It is according to Mountford. It is also synonymous to lacks or what students do not know in English according to Robinson 1991. So thus, we can say that the most important difference lies in the learners and their purposes for learning English. In designing ESP course syllabus materials, we have to know why learners need to learn English. As we knew that many job requirements need an English skills nowadays, people have to speak English for effective and better communication according to their job responsibilities. Thus, Hutchinson and Waters in year 1987 identified the two types of needs. First is the target needs, are mainly related what the learner need to do in the target situation. In order to answer this statement, ESP practitioner should also gather information about learners' necessities, lacks, and wants. So, necessities is determined by the demands of the target situation. That is what the learner has to know in order to function effectively in the target situation. So the second component is to identify the lacks of the learners, and this could be done when evaluating the level of language proficiency they already have. Common mistakes manifested are considered as lacks, while the ones implied the learners will have their own views, and this may conflict with the perception of other interested parties like the ESP practitioners. After the target needs, we will analyze the learning needs, and it is defined as the factors that affect the learning like attitude, motivation, awareness, personality, learning styles, and strategies. In fact, the learning needs is a subject highly related to the learner's language problems, learning objectives, and the way they learn. So moving on, need analysis is defined as a complex process involving much more than simply looking at what the learners will have to do in the target situation. It is the key stage and the cornerstone of ESP and leads to a focused course. According to Robinson, it is generally regarded as critical to ESP. Although ESP by no means the only educational enterprise which makes us use of it. Likewise, Scriven suggests that needs analysis is a necessary first step for specific purposes language teaching that is concerned concerned with nature of scientific discourse. So needs analysis is a systematic set of procedures used to determine the gap or discrepancy between a present state and a desired state.
Let us now move on to the history of needs analysis. The term needs analysis first appeared in the 1920s in the West Bengal, a province of India, when Michael West introduced the concept of needs to cover what learners will be required to do with a foreign language in the target situation and how learners might best master the language during the period learning. After 1920s, the term needs analysis came to an end to exist until 1960 when the term English for specific purposes appeared at the Makerere Conference. So it is also known as Commonwealth Education Committee in 1961. So the concept of need analysis has been along the decades. At the initial stages of ESP, need analysis consisted in assessing the communicative needs of the learners and the techniques of achieving a specific teaching objectives. Needs analysis encompasses the following. First, professional information about the learners. Then, personal information about the learners. Of course, it is vital to know the professional and personal information of the learners in order for the teachers to know what particular thing should be considered in order to meet their needs. Then, English language information about the learners. Next, the learners lacks. So knowing what English language information where learners are lacking can be a vital asset for teachers of English for specific purposes. Then, language learning information. Next, professional communication information about the learner's wants. Then, what is wanted from the course? Then, information about the environment. So this is where the process of establishing the what and how of a course is done. All the things mentioned certainly aims to present learners' wants, needs, and lacks prior to organizing a course. So all of this must be taken into account to develop a learning-centered approach, need analysis. So let us now proceed to the process of need analysis. So basically, there are 4 types that we need to consider, such as describe the desired performance, describe the current performance, describe the performance gaps and causes, and prioritize solutions. So let us discuss it one by one. So the first one is describe the desired performance. The starting point is to clearly describe the desired state of the performance. In short, it is to determine what are the skills, knowledge, and behaviors needed to perform a task or job effectively. So this is where we should describe the target group, whether they are supervisors, activity leads, and etc. So another thing is we should describe the desired performance or behaviors where we need to use actionable terms. On the other hand, describing regulatory requirements that determine need must be taken into consideration. And most especially, describing the programs or business expectations for performance. So understanding the needs of the learners can contribute to the successful course planning. Hence, the purpose of needs analysis is first to find out what language skills a learner needs. So finding out what language skills a learner needs will help the teachers to guide learners in order for them to perform a specific role. So next, to help determine if an existing course adequately addresses the needs of potential students. So ESP emerged as an answer to the social demand associated with flourishing business environment. Hence, the demand for qualified workers have immensely increased. So the teacher inclined to design to the ESP course is compelled to begin from analyzing learners' needs and their forthcoming use of the language. To conclude, the main purpose of need analysis is to investigate students' needs and wants in order to make an effective ESP course syllabus that can help teachers to identify the students' prospective professional needs, the students' needs in terms of language skills, and the students' deficiencies in the area of language skills that can lead to increasing the learner's motivation and success.
So the next process is called describe the current performance. So once the team or your group has described the desired or determined the desired performance of a student, such as the skills, knowledge, and behavior, the next step is determining what the actual or what the specific performance that a student must do. So this can be achieved by performing one or more of the following based on the judgment of group. So first is interviewing subject matter experts to determine current performance levels. So with that means you will interview experts in that field for their expertise and opinions on the performance levels and their performance expectations for you to have a guide on what to see from the students. So next is interviewing supervisors to determine current performance levels. So in this case, you will interview the actual supervisors or managers of the students. So next is interviewing and observing work or for work outputs of representatives and target audiences. So in this case, you will interview some representatives of the target audiences for you to be able to know their perspective on the student in the student's actual work. So next is reviewing procedures and regulations to determine performance expectations. So lastly, reviewing relevant self-assessments, reports, lesson learned, and near misses for the evidence of performance. So the third process is called describe performance gaps and causes. So what are gaps? Gaps are the lacks or the missing skills and knowledge of a student that needs to be addressed. So now that our team has a clear picture or a clear insight of the performance expectations and the current state or the present state of performance of the student, it's time to describe the gaps or the lacks and causes, as well as the consequences of poor performance, the difficulty to correct critically the performance. So in order to describe the performance gaps and causes, we have to take considerations of the following elements. So these elements are as follows. First is performance expectations. So performance expectations can be our guide or criteria for us to know what to expect or what the student must do in order for them to improve themselves in their field of work. So next is gaps. So in gaps, as I've said before, these are the lacks. In order to fill these gaps, we must first give them their needs. So for example, a student needs guidance, so you can go tutor or give him or her an orientation about the problem or the field. So third is causes. So causes can vary into different things. So causes can be lack of knowledge or skill, some lack of information, feedback, proper feedback, and lack of will motivation, some unclear expectations, directions, and supervision, and work environment factors. So this can negatively impact the performance level of a student if not tended or if not be able to have a solution quickly as soon as possible. So lastly, consequences and difficulty to correct. So these have three levels, such as low, medium, and high. So consequences refers to the negative outcomes of the performance level of a student, and difficulty to correct refers to how difficult or how hard it is to correct the gaps or lacks of a student. So the last stage is called prioritize solution. So in this stage, the team needs to form a bridge or a structure from analysis to action. So you are done analyzing. Now it's time to implement an action. So in this step, it determines what needs are most critical and what are the possible solutions. So the outcome, a needs analysis report that management can use to decide a course of action. So in this process, it has four steps. So the first step is identify possible solution. So at a minimum, proposed solution should meet the criteria of effect on causes acceptability, and feasibility, which includes the resources. In identifying possible solutions, first we have to evaluate and rate each solution separately, which means that every possible solution must be analyzed and reviewed in order to pick out what is the most applicable solution. So next is evaluate cost and effort to implement. So we will assess, or we will review how much effort it is the solution to be implemented. So next is evaluate the effectiveness. We must evaluate how effective the solution can be to solve our problem. And lastly, how sustainable the solution will be. So step 2, select solutions. So in this step, you are now done analyzing, evaluating, and reviewing. And this step, you have picked the most applicable solution to the problem. So step 3, proposed in action plan and recommendations. So the plan should include the recommended solutions with its description, the rationale, and the proposed timelines and resource requirements. So lastly, step 4, you must prepare a report. So in preparing a report, it must have description of the needs analysis process, the major outcomes identified, the prioritized needs, and the criteria that you use, and finally, the action plan recommendations.
Have the 3 types of needs analysis. So, different components of language needs analysis are used to investigate various focuses and issues in language planning, development, teaching, and learning. Many ESP scholars believe that the target situation analysis, or the TSA, the present situation analysis, or the PSA, and the pedagogical need analysis, or the PNA, are the fundamental components for assessing learners' language needs. Let us now deal with the first type, which is the target situation analysis. Primarily, target situation analysis is a type of needs analysis that focuses on identifying learners' language needs in a professional or academic setting. According to Dudley Evans and St. John, TSA consists of objective, recognized, and product-oriented requirements. In line with this, it is important to distinguish between target needs and learning needs. Target needs relate to what students need to do to set goals, and learning needs relate to what learners need to do. The sources of knowledge for needs analysis are assumed to be the students themselves, academic institutions, and the potential employers. Students act as a model for a better understanding of the concept of need. In conclusion, the target situation analysis is concerned with the expected outcome to be made. Also, this has an essential role when making syllabus, for it will serve as the basis of what to be taught or implemented in the teaching and learning process for English and specific purposes. So we put emphasis more on the target upon teaching learning process. Secondly, we have the second type, which is the present situation analysis. So this needs analysis focuses on the student's language level at the beginning of the language program about their strengths and weaknesses. ESP practitioners seek information on skills, resources, and perspectives on language teaching and learning. The present situation analysis, or the PSA, assesses the strengths and weaknesses of the language skills and learning experience. Once the curriculum designer understands the needs of the student, it'll be easier to select the right learning materials and techniques for the learning process. In the field of technical English, in addition to target and learning context analysis, actual situation analysis, or the present situation analysis, should also be performed. So this needs analysis identifies student skills, the goals, abilities, perceptions related to subject areas and requirements and genres. In addition, PSA can be used to identify learner deficiencies in the learning process and identify gaps between needs, knowledge, skills, and performance. So finding accurate data on the student perception will help a lot for teacher to design and determine materials based on students' expectations and improve student performance. And for the last type, we have the pedagogical needs analysis. This type of needs analysis consists of three components, namely the deficiency analysis, strategic or learning needs analysis, and means analysis. So we're going to deal with them one by one later on. So mainly, the term pedagogic needs analysis refers to the three components of requirements analysis as mentioned earlier. So it is insisted that the idea of shortcomings of goal requirements analysis need to be addressed by collecting data on students and on their environment. So let us now have the first component, which is the deficiency analysis. Considering the learner's current needs or desires can be described as investigating the learner's deficiency. So let's just say, for example, the path from point A or the actual state to point B is determined by under-analysis or the target state. Therefore, deficiency analysis can serve as the basis for a language course. And it was intended to provide information on the gap between the current and target non-linguistic skills and general English skills, language skills, and of course the teaching method. For the second component, we have the strategy analysis and learning needs analysis. So this form of requirements analysis looks at the method students used when learning another language. It tries to determine how the learner wants to learn and not what the learners need to learn. So the gap between needs or the ability of students to recognize that they are related to themselves and the needs or the needs that the students value in a limited amount of time and the defects or the students' current and required abilities is distinguished. Obviously, learning needs of the students are important. They prefer a process-oriented approach, and what should be taught to products and non-goal-oriented students is the skills that enable them to reach their goals. So we need to address the goals, learning, the motivation, the learning process, and the fact that the different students learn using different methods. So for the last component, we have the means analysis. So this attempts to analyze the factors described in communicative syllabus of Mandy on the year 1978. So the design excludes logistics and other issues.
So here are the example for each type of needs analysis. First, we have the target situation analysis. For example, let us apply the English for occupational purposes. For example, a student is studying business English since he or she wants to prepare using English in a future or in a present or future work situation. This is considered a target needs since students are required to develop English skills with a focus on business context and environments. And they will learn various vocabulary that is used to the business world. Secondly, we have the present situation analysis. So for example, as students know how to speak in English but is having a hard time in expressing his or her opinion and having a trouble in communicating with others due to lack of confidence to speak. So thinking that he or she might be grammatically error. Third, we have the pedagogical needs analysis. So for example, a foreign Filipino students are lacking the knowledge to speak fluent English in American institution. Therefore, the strategies that is only applicable is to read English textbook and to hire English tutor. Since the only cultural differences between the American student and the Filipino student is their accents, still the Filipino foreign students can manage to interact with other American students. So for the next slide, what are the sources for needs analysis? So here are the sources for needs analysis. First, we have the learners. So why learners considered as the sources for needs analysis? It is because learners are the one who deals with the ability to perform particular communicative skills. And those communicative tasks that performed by the learners, this result for this kind of evaluation that enables the sponsors, the learners, and the teachers to decide whether and how much tuition is required. The next one is the people who are working in the field. So the second one are as the people who are working on the field. When we say people working on the field, of course, these are the people who are working in a field of ESP, or those people who studied or teaches the needs analysis. So why these people working on the field considered as the sources? Because they are the one who identify their learners' key requirements or needs for them to determine the areas in which their learners are lacking of. Third, we have the ex-students. Fourth, we have the colleagues. And lastly, the ESP research in the field. So why ESP research in the field considered as one of the sources for needs analysis? It is because their researches contributes to the understanding of both the teachers and the students' awareness of the learning processes. The communication breakdowns that occurs during the classroom speaking abilities and strategies that students perceive. So the last slide focus on the main instrument for executing needs analysis. First, we have the questionnaire. So questionnaire is one of the useful tools for finding out a whole range of information which will help inform you or your decision related to the class. So secondly, the analysis of authentic spoken or written text. So this can be used to add more interest for the learners. It can serve as a reminder for the learners that there is an entire population who use the target language in their everyday lives. So third, the discussion. So discussion are a variety of forums for open-ended collaborative exchange of ideas among the teachers and the student, or among students, for the purpose of furthering students' thinking, learning, problem solving, understanding, or the literary appreciation. So fourth is the structured interview. So structured interviews are easy to replicate as a fixed set of closed questions are used, which are easy to quantify, and this means that it is easy to test for the reliability. And also a structured interview are fairly quick to conduct, which means that many interviews can take place within a short period of time. Lastly, we have the observation and assessment. For me, this observation and assessment is one of the most important element or instrument for executing need analysis. Why? Because it is the process in which we are going to decide which needs have the highest priority. Because in observation and assessment, it is a process on which we are able to identify, because in this process, this is the time in which we are going to decide what needs do we have to prioritize for our learners to easily adopt learning, or this is the process on how we are going to make judgment on what needs do we have to prioritize for the betterment of our learners.
In generalization, ESP emerged as an answer to the social demand associated with flourishing business environment. Thus, teachers are inclined to design to the ESP course is compelled to begin with analyzing the needs of the learners. To conclude, the results of the needs analysis helps the teachers to identify the students' prospective professional needs, the students' needs in terms of language skills, and the students' deficiencies in the area of language skills. Thus, needs analysis is the foundation on which we can develop curriculum content, teaching materials and methods that can lead to increasing the learner's motivation and success.